Alright, Diet 2. In case you couldn't tell by the fact that it sounds the same and the camera angle is slightly different, but basically the same thing. This is filmed directly after. Again, don't get used to these suckers getting uploaded so close together. It's just, when I was recording it, I realized that anti-pescatarian, or my anti-Fexit, no, it's anti-pesco-flaxitarianism, and the Atkins diet don't really belong in the same episode. So, I thought I'd make an episode 2 of this right away, just while I was thinking about it. The Atkins diet, and you can notice that it didn't take 5 minutes to get into this one, because it's not a first episode, even though sometimes it still does, in like 8th episodes. But, the Atkins diet, as far as I understand it, pretty much boils down to you don't eat fat, or carbohydrates, which amounts to fat, because you want your body to basically have to burn fat. Your body will naturally go to burning carbohydrates first, as a result, it'll first burn carbohydrates and save fat, because naturally that's what we do. We can preserve fat for longer, so that way when we need to run away from a big tiger or whatever that's about to eat us, we then can burn into those fat reserves. But the result is now, along with some other evolutionary biology, maybe? Yeah, I guess evolutionary... No, maybe it's evolutionary psychology still. Anyways, a mix of evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology reasons, pretty much people are becoming fat now because there's no big tigers to chase us away. If we exercise, it's because we choose to, and we are not naturally set up for that choice. Anyways, so, and then there's also certain factors, and I think this would be more evolutionary psychology. Anyways, that just by nature, we're not the only creature which does this. As someone who's had fish in the past, I can tell you that fish do it too. If food is in front of us, we eat it. It's not just finish your meal sort of attitudes from more Western cultures, or maybe Eastern too, and Central. I don't know, but it's actually a factor of the human condition that we, if presented with a large amount of food, our bodies will tell us that we are hungry enough for all of that food. So even, it's when you eat a whole bunch, and then afterwards you're feeling sick and you have no idea how you ate all that much. And it's because while the food was in front of you, your brain, even if your body was highly protesting, your brain is sending constant signals telling you, no, you're perfect, you're starving, you need to eat more. And that's, anyways. So, the Atkins diet avoids carbohydrates and basically cheats the system by forcing your body to burn fat. So you get really thin really fast. I have one main problem with it, and if you've seen the first episodes in this series, you'll pretty much know what it is, understand it. Anyways, it's that it relies very heavily on fish. Well, actually, eggs mostly. But more or less what it comes down to with that diet is you get to eat vegetables, eggs, and fish. Is what it comes down to. I was actually really looking into, well, if not the Atkins diet, a light version of the Atkins diet. Avoid carbohydrates more, so that my body would have to burn into fat first. I thought that would be a solid idea. There's actually other reasons you really shouldn't. It's not actually healthy. In case you couldn't tell, there's actually a solid reason why our bodies go to carbohydrates first. It's really just better to eat less in general than to eat the same amount but make it all veggies and fish and eggs occasionally, or eggs a lot and fish occasionally. Anyways, but more or less what it comes down to with the Atkins diet is, even more so than a lot of other diets, your diet gets really, really boring. The Atkins diet basically forces you to eat mostly veggies. You can put them, it's the kind of things like, oh, you want to have a cauliflower omelet? Okay, good. And then even so, everything has carbohydrates in it, and you're supposed to get, depending on who I heard it from, they said that the lightest version of it was like 50, so a really light Atkins diet was about 50 carbohydrates. So you're not having many of those eggs either. you're basically having things like asparagus and cauliflower as your main sources of anything. And then eggs once in a while, because eggs are just so happen to be very low in carbohydrates. Diet gets really crazy boring, because you would be surprised. Dairy, actually, one of the main reasons that I dropped it really quickly, even the concept of having a more Atkins-like diet, was that you pretty much can't touch dairy. You have 50 a day, and that doesn't mean you can have one thing a day that's high in carbohydrates, as long as you have a little bit of it. You literally, by just eating normal things that are super low in carbohydrates, you'll be hitting that 50. Some of them have it as low as 20, and honestly, I don't know how you would do that and still, like, stay conscious from not eating so little. So, I do not recommend the Atkins diet, is what this whole video is pretty much about. It is, although there is one other main reason. Although there is to be said about it that it is super effective, the problem with it is, even if you actually go on it, it seems to be too effective, because there's a lot, when I was researching about it, and I actually researched a little bit after I fully decided not to do it, so I admit that might have altered my research into it. I might have been a bit too pessimistic about it. But anyways, I happened upon a whole bunch of these different sources which basically said, alright, I went on the Atkins diet, and you should never do that, because it turns out, it actually, well, it makes sense though, but it takes a little while for your body to adjust to your diet, and then once it is, it doesn't immediately switch back to another diet. So, once you're in the Atkins diet, you can't just stop it. You get to your ideal weight, great. You switch back to your normal diet, that's interesting. Your body's going to keep burning fat for, I think it's like 2 times, or no, it was like half the time you were on the Atkins diet or something like that. It differs for anyone. So anyways, it takes, we'll say, it's actually really quick weight loss. So we'll say you were on it for like 2 months, you lost 100 pounds. Okay, congratulations. Because it took you a little while to get into it and start losing the weight really quickly, you're going to lose another 75 pounds. But even eating a really fattening diet. So anyways, the problem is a whole bunch of people will take it, get to their ideal weight, and then become skeletons or die. So, you know, don't do the Atkins diet. Even the people who plan it out and get like halfway to their ideal weight and then cut it off, generally say that they pretty much go into the realm that they consider too skinny for themselves, and they lose not just fat, but they lose a whole bunch of muscle as well. So anyways, you end up basically a twig with twigs coming out of it that were formerly considered limbs. So don't do it. It's a bad idea. That said, I would recommend in general, in terms of my very extremely admittedly limited dietary experience, that not just, as far as I understand it, from those people who have gone on very successful diets, the diet, as I probably neglected to say in the first episode, is actually the majority of the weight loss. As someone who lives a very active life, well, more or less when I can help it, and I actually mean when I can help it, I don't just like, oh, it's the end of the day, I'm tired, it's not my fault that I'm going to go sit on the couch for the next 6 hours. I actually would go do stuff at that point. Or like it's Saturday and the whole week was busy. It's not laziness of me to sit on this couch on Saturday. So I don't know. I avoid that stuff. But from people that I've talked to, apparently the majority of weight loss is the diet. You can be as active. Well, I've heard it. Everyone disagrees, but I think the average seems to think that the weight loss is only 30% from an active, being active. It's at least 70% from, it's an average of 70%. And by an average, I mean a lot of people say like, oh, it's only 50, and then a lot more people say it's like, oh, it's 95% of the it's dieting anyways. It's mostly dieting, and the majority of what that comes down to is, but it's exercising so that you can't eat more. It comes down to be active and don't bring food or money with you. So, you know, go do something that you're 30 miles away. You'll be fat. You'll be starving by the time you get home. But ideally, it'll also be late, so you'll make some quick thing, ideally a healthy quick thing, go to bed, and then you just won't have eaten a quarter. You'll have eaten a quarter as much that day. And it'll also force you to eat really high, for instance, high protein. You can have, this, I'm not saying go full Atkins, but you can have a higher protein diet. So instead of eating carbohydrates and things like chips, you'll end up eating things like, you'll end up eating, dairy products, because dairy products, although they're high in carbs for the Atkins diet, they're also high in basically everything good for you. So you'll find yourself, I've heard of people who switch over to very healthy diets saying, like, I never drank milk I had water in my cereal. Milk just wasn't a thing for me. Then I went and got healthy, and now I drink milk straight up as like one of every 3 meals. Personally, I drink milk in every 2 of 3 meals if I can help it. So that's probably one reason I get away with exercising a whole bunch and not getting tired so quickly, and that's because I have a very high protein diet, even if it's not particularly low carb. Or at least not. It's all right. I want to point something out. When I say not particularly low carb, I should preface, I pretty much don't drink soda, and I don't eat chips. At least I don't eat traditional, Doritos, stuff like that are basically made of sodium and carbs and nothing else. Anyways, so what I mean is, in terms of food that's not immediately awful for you, I eat things which are pretty high carb. Anyways, then again, I'm not exactly the picture of health myself. But in terms of my researching in this topic, I would say, although going higher in protein is a positive idea, and lowering carbs, at least in relation to protein, is a good idea, dropping carbs is not a great idea. You will, at best, turn yourself into a skeleton who can barely lift a pencil, because you'll lose so much muscle. At worst, you'll just kill yourself, and that's not good. Don't do it, but do consider a healthier diet. And in this series, as occasionally as these episodes will come out, I'll try and find the ideal diet. I think at this point, although it might just be me, no matter what I do, I'm not going to consider the ideal diet as something which suggests anything other than a high dairy consumption. So I'm pretty much already not going to find the perfect ideal. But the journey is what's important. So enjoy the generalized outro.